Racist bikers attacked a black veteran, unaware his dog was a former military hero. The dusty road stretched for miles under the blazing Arizona sun as David Carter, a retired black Marine, walked steadily along the highway's shoulder. Beside him, his loyal Belgian Malinois, Titan, trotted in perfect step. The pair had been through more than most people could imagine: combat missions overseas, explosions, and the never-ending ghosts of war. But today, they faced a different kind of battle. David had spent the morning visiting an old friend in the nearby town of Prescott and was now making his way back home. His truck had broken down about 5 miles out, and with no immediate help, he figured he and Titan could make the trek back. It wasn't ideal, but he'd seen worse days. As they walked, the distant rumble of engines grew louder behind them. A pack of motorcycles roared up the road, closing in quickly. David had dealt with enough trouble in his life to recognize the signs of a bad situation brewing. He instinctively adjusted his grip on Titan's leash and prepared himself. The gang of bikers, clad in leather jackets and Nazi insignia patches, slowed as they approached him. The leader, a thick-set man with a Confederate flag bandana and scars across his knuckles, sneered. Well, look what we got here, boys," he called out, revving his engine. "A lost little soldier?" David didn't react. He had long learned that silence was sometimes the deadliest weapon. "You deaf, boy?" another biker shouted, spitting near his boots. "Ain't you a little far from home?" David exhaled slowly. "Just passing through," he said in an even tone. The leader scoffed. "Ain't no, just passing through, around here." One of the bikers dismounted and stepped uncomfortably close. Titan, ever the disciplined warrior, remained still, but David felt the tension in his leash. His dog knew trouble when he saw it. "What you got in the bag?" the biker demanded, motioning to David's duffel. David knew where this was heading. He was outnumbered 5-1, and these men weren't just looking to harass, they wanted violence. "I don't want any trouble," David said, keeping his voice calm. "Too late for that," the leader chuckled. "You see, we don't like." Before he could finish his sentence, Titan moved. Like a shadow breaking from the night, the military-trained dog launched at the nearest biker, sinking his teeth into the man's forearm before he could react. A scream of pain cut through the air as Titan dragged him to the ground. David took the opportunity to strike. A sharp elbow to the ribs sent another biker stumbling backward. Titan released his first target and leaped onto the gang leader, his powerful jaws locking onto the man's shoulder. "Get him off me," the leader shrieked, flailing. Titan didn't let go. David stood tall, unafraid. "You picked the wrong man to mess with." One of the bikers pulled a knife, but before he could use it, Titan released the leader and turned on him. With the speed of a trained war dog, Titan lunged, knocking the weapon from his hand with a precise bite. The man stumbled back, falling onto the pavement. The bikers, now panicked, scrambled to get back onto their bikes. Their leader clutched his bleeding shoulder, his earlier arrogance replaced by sheer terror. "You're lucky he was trained to stop on command," David warned, "or none of you would be walking away." Titan, panting but calm, stood at David's side, his dark eyes locked onto the gang. They knew now they had underestimated him. More importantly, they had underestimated Titan, a former military working dog who had saved countless lives on the battlefield. The bikers didn't wait for more. Engines roared as they fled, kicking up dust as they sped down the road. David knelt beside Titan and scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," he murmured. The dog wagged his tail as if nothing had happened. David took a deep breath and looked toward the horizon. It was just another fight. Another battle survived. And Titan? He was still the hero he had always been. As the dust settled and the last growl faded from Titan's throat, David sighed. He hadn't wanted trouble, but trouble always had a way of finding him. The bikers were gone, but the fight left behind more than just bruises and scratches. It stirred something deeper inside him, something he had been trying to leave behind since his military days. Titan sat beside him, ears perked, still on high alert. Even in the heat of battle, the dog remained disciplined, a true soldier through and through. David knelt beside him, running a hand over the scar on his muzzle, a mark from a past mission in Afghanistan. "You saved my ass again, buddy," he muttered. Titan wagged his tail, as if to say, "That's what I do." David stood up and dusted off his jeans. The fight had left his muscles tense, but he knew he needed to keep moving. The last thing he wanted was for the bikers to regroup and come back with reinforcements. Just as he was about to resume walking, the distant sound of a car engine approached. A rusty pickup truck slowed as it neared him, then pulled over to the shoulder. The driver, a middle-aged white man in a sheriff's uniform, stepped out. David's body stiffened. He wasn't in the mood for another confrontation. "Everything all right here?" the sheriff asked, glancing at the scuffle marks on the pavement and the still-present traces of blood. David didn't answer right away. He had dealt with law enforcement before, and experience had taught him that their involvement wasn't always for the best. "Had a little run-in," David finally said. "But it's over now." The sheriff studied him carefully. His gaze then shifted to Titan, whose disciplined posture told him everything he needed to know. "That your dog?" David nodded. "Yeah. Name's Titan." The sheriff squinted at Titan, then back at David. "You Carter?" "David Carter." David frowned slightly. "Yeah. Why?" The sheriff's face softened. "I knew a guy at the station who talked about you. Said you served in the Marines." "That true?" David didn't see any point in lying. "Yeah. Retired now." A slow nod. The sheriff glanced back toward the road, then down at the bloodied ground. "Those bikers, Reaper's sons?" David shrugged. "Didn't ask for their club name." The sheriff sighed. "They've been causing trouble around these parts for a while. Been looking for an excuse to put him away." He motioned toward the dog. "Looks like Titan gave him one hell of a lesson." David smirked. "He's had good training." The sheriff chuckled. "More than good. I recognize that stance of his right away. That dog's military, ain't he?" David nodded. "We served together overseas. He saved lives, including mine." The sheriff's expression shifted from casual to serious respect. "Damn, that dog's a hero." Titan, as if understanding the praise, wagged his tail slightly but remained disciplined. The sheriff put his hands on his hips. "Listen, Carter. I don't know what those bastards were up to, but I'm guessing it wasn't just casual conversation." David exhaled. "They didn't like me walking through." The sheriff shook his head. "Typical. But you handled yourself." He looked back at the road. "Tell you what, I'll drive you and Titan back into town. You shouldn't have to walk after all that." David hesitated, but Titan's relaxed posture told him that, for once, maybe trusting this officer wasn't a mistake. "All right," he said. The sheriff opened the truck door, and Titan jumped in first, settling in the back seat like he had done 100 times before in military Humvees. David climbed in after him, shutting the door behind him. As they drove off, the sheriff spoke. "You know, the town's got a veterans event coming up. Wouldn't hurt for people to hear about you." And Titan. David chuckled. "We don't do speeches." The sheriff smiled. "Didn't say you had to. But a hero like Titan deserves some recognition." David looked down at his dog, who rested his head on his knee, finally relaxed. "Yeah," David said softly. "He does." The truck rolled on toward town, leaving the fight behind, but carrying the legacy of 2 soldiers, 1 man, 1 dog, who had never truly left the battlefield. The sheriff's pickup truck rolled into the small town of Prescott, Arizona, its tires crunching against the dirt roads as it pulled up in front of the local Veterans Center. The center wasn't much, a modest brick building with an American flag waving proudly outside, but to the people who had served, it was a second home. As David stepped out of the truck, Titan leaped down beside him, his keen eyes scanning the area as he always did. A few veterans, sitting outside on the porch smoking and chatting, paused their conversation when they saw David and his dog. "Sheriff," one of the older men greeted. Then his gaze landed on David. "And who's this?" The sheriff clapped David on the back. "This here's David Carter, Marine vet. And that," he pointed at Titan, "is one hell of a war dog." The older man, Bill Henderson, a retired Army sergeant with silver hair and a prosthetic leg, sat forward in his chair. His eyes widened as he recognized the dog's disciplined stance. "I'll be damned," Bill muttered. "That's a military working dog, ain't he?" David nodded. "Yeah, we served together." Bill stood up, shaking David's hand firmly. "Welcome, son. And welcome to you too, Titan." He reached out cautiously, and Titan, sensing no threat, allowed the old veteran to scratch behind his ears. The other men gathered around, intrigued by the well-trained dog and the quiet but strong presence of his handler. "Sheriff, what's this all about?" Bill asked. The sheriff crossed his arms. "Carter and Titan had a run-in with those racist biker punks on the highway." The men muttered among themselves, their expressions darkening. "Reaper's sons?" Bill asked, his jaw tightening. "Yeah," David confirmed. A heavy silence settled over the group. Finally, Bill exhaled through his nose. "Bastards have been causing trouble for a while now. Heard they don't take too kindly to anyone who doesn't look like him." David wasn't surprised. Another veteran, Carlos Rivera, spoke up. "So what happened?" David shrugged. "They tried to start something. Titan ended it." The men exchanged glances. Bill grinned. Now that I would have paid to see. A few chuckled, but beneath the humor was real respect. They all knew what a trained military dog was capable of. The fact that Titan had sent an entire gang of violent bikers running? That was something. Carlos leaned in, eyeing the sheriff. You gonna do something about them, Sheriff? The sheriff exhaled. Working on it. But those types don't scare easy. They'll be back. David knew that too. He had seen men like them before. Cowards in numbers. Bullies who preyed on fear. They weren't finished yet. Bill studied David for a long moment. Listen, son, he said finally. This town's got a veterans ceremony coming up tomorrow. Just a small thing, honoring the men who served. I think you and Titan should be there. David shook his head. We don't do crowds. Bill smirked. Ain't about crowds. It's about family. And right now, you and Titan? You're part of ours. David hesitated, but when he looked down at Titan, who was sitting calmly by his side, he knew what the dog would say if he could. Finally, David nodded. All right, we'll come. The old veteran grinned. Good, 'cause you two got a story that needs telling. That night, David couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Years in combat had sharpened his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him. He sat outside his small house on the outskirts of town, Titan lying at his feet, ears twitching at every distant noise. The town was quiet, but David knew better than to trust the silence. Then, around midnight, Titan's head shot up. A low growl rumbled in his throat. David immediately tensed, his hand moving toward the Glock 19 he kept holstered at his side. A second later, the sound of motorcycle engines shattered the quiet. The bikers were back. David stood up slowly, scanning the darkness. He counted at least 6 headlights in the distance, moving fast. Titan's growl deepened, his stance shifting into attack mode. David exhaled. All right, boy. Looks like we've got company. The motorcycles pulled up outside his property, their engines cutting off one by one. The gang leader, the same man Titan had bitten earlier, stepped forward. His arm was now bandaged, but his fury was still fresh. You think you can make fools out of us and walk away? The leader snarled. David didn't answer. Another biker, a tall man with tattoos creeping up his neck, pulled out a baseball bat and slammed it against his palm. We don't take kindly to being disrespected. David glanced down at Titan. Neither do we. The gang leader smirked. You ain't got nowhere to run, soldier boy. And that mutt? He's just a dog. David's lips curled into a dangerous smile. Titan, he said, voice firm. Defend. The next few seconds were a blur of chaos. Titan launched forward with the power of a missile, teeth bared, a trained war machine unleashed. The first biker barely had time to react before Titan clamped down on his wrist, tearing the bat from his hand. David moved at the same time, stepping into the fight with a precision that only a trained Marine could execute. He grabbed the closest attacker, twisting his arm and sending him crashing to the dirt. A biker lunged at David with a knife, but Titan, already done with his first target, intercepted, his powerful jaws clamping onto the man's leg and dragging him down. The gang, overwhelmed and outmatched, quickly realized they had underestimated their opponent. Again, the leader, still clutching his injured shoulder, stumbled backward. We'll be back, he stammered. This ain't over. David took a slow step forward, his eyes locked onto the cowardly leader. Yes, it is, he said coldly. Titan let out one last growl, and the bikers scrambled onto their motorcycles, roaring away into the night like the cowards they were. David stood in the quiet once more, unshaken, undefeated. Titan returned to his side, his tail wagging slightly as if to say, We did good, boss. David patted his head. Good boy. But he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over yet.